She was already telling you. You just didn't know what to listen for. That is the part that stays with most men. Not the rejection, not the missed connection, but the moment they find out, weeks or months later, that something was there, that someone was showing them, quietly and consistently, that they were interested, and they missed it. Not because they were careless, not because they weren't paying attention, but because no one ever told them what they were actually supposed to be looking at. The signals women send when they are attracted to someone are almost never the obvious ones. They are not dramatic declarations. They are not the things you see in movies. They are behavioral patterns, quiet, consistent, sometimes involuntary, that run underneath ordinary interaction like a current beneath still water. And here is the thing about that current. It is already moving around you right now, in your daily life, in conversations you have already had this week, in moments you walked away from without understanding what they actually were. There is a woman in your life right now who may already be showing you she wants you, and you are probably reading every signal wrong. By the end of this video, you will be able to see exactly what you have been missing, calmly, clearly, and without second-guessing yourself. You probably thought she just happened to end up next to you. She didn't happen to do anything. When a woman is attracted to someone, one of the earliest and most reliable things she begins doing is engineering proximity, finding reasons, often unconscious ones, to exist in the same physical space as the person she is drawn to. Behavioral researchers refer to this as proximity seeking, which is simply the natural human tendency to reduce physical distance toward people or things we find emotionally significant. The difference is that in attraction, it happens with a specific quality. It is consistent, it is patterned, and when you look back at it, it almost always involves choice. She does not just end up next to you at the meeting. She arrives early enough to have options, and she chooses the seat beside you. She does not just happen to be standing near you at the gathering. She repositioned at some point in the evening, and now she is there. In a group where she could be anywhere, she finds an orbit that keeps you within reach. That is not geography. That is intention, even when she herself could not fully explain it. Now you might be thinking, couldn't this just be coincidence? And sometimes, genuinely, yes. One instance of proximity means very little. But here is the detail that separates coincidence from pattern. Women who are attracted to someone do this repeatedly across different settings, under different circumstances. It is not a single occurrence. It is a quiet, recurring fact. You notice it once and think nothing of it. You notice it 4 times in different rooms and you are looking at something real. The mistake most men make when they encounter this signal is interpreting it as friendliness rather than selection. She is warm, she is social, she ends up near you, and he concludes she is simply an outgoing person. And perhaps she is. But outgoing people spread their proximity across a room. Attracted women concentrate it, but proximity is only the first layer. What she does once she's close to you, specifically what she does with her attention, is where the signal becomes unmistakable. There is a difference between a woman who hears you and a woman who is listening to you. Most men never notice it. Polite attention is one of the most common social behaviors in human interaction. People nod, they respond, they smile at appropriate moments. It is a script most adults have internalized so thoroughly that it happens automatically, without real engagement. And most men, if they are honest, cannot tell the difference between polite social listening and something else, something deeper, when it is directed at them. Here is what genuine attracted attention looks like. She remembers something you mentioned in passing 3 weeks ago and brings it up unprompted, not because it was important to the conversation, but because it was important to her that she was listening. She asks a follow-up question about something you said 10 minutes earlier in a conversation that has since moved on. She laughs, not at every funny thing you say, which is the polite response, but specifically at the ones that are actually funny, which means she is genuinely tracking the difference. And when you are speaking in a group, her attention finds you even when someone else is talking. That last detail matters. In a group conversation, watch where her eyes rest when she is not the one speaking. People whose attention is divided drift. They check the room, they monitor the group. A woman who is attracted to someone tends to anchor, and that anchor, more often than not, is him. Of course, context always matters here. Some people are naturally high-focus listeners. A therapist, a teacher, a naturally empathetic person may give this quality of attention broadly as a personality trait. What separates general attentiveness from attracted attentiveness is the specificity and the memory. Remembering the small details of what you have said is not something most people do for everyone. It requires unconscious investment. And unconscious investment only goes where interest already exists. The attention she gives you tells you she's interested. But there's a second kind of attention, one she gives without even realizing she's giving it, that tells you something even more specific. Her body will begin agreeing with yours before her mind has made any decision. That's not a metaphor, that's neuroscience. Behavioral mirroring is one of the most well-documented phenomena in social psychology. It is the tendency for people to unconsciously adopt the posture, pace, rhythm, and gestures of those they feel connected to or attracted to. The key word in that sentence is unconsciously. Deliberate mimicry has a different quality. It is slightly too precise, slightly too quick. What you are looking for is the slow, organic synchronization that happens without either person noticing. She picks up her drink shortly after you pick up yours. When you shift your weight to one side, she gradually does the same. When you slow your speech, she slows hers. When you lean slightly forward into the conversation, the distance between you quietly narrows. These are not choices. They are the body doing what the mind has not yet decided to do, and that distinction matters enormously because it means the signal is not performed, it cannot be manufactured. It surfaces because it is real. Before we move to the next signal, there is one additional layer to this that most explanations completely skip over. Mirroring alone is not a conclusive signal. It can happen in deep professional rapport, in close friendships, in any relationship where genuine connection exists. What gives it meaning in an attraction context is the cluster it appears in. When you notice her mirroring your movements consistently, and you have also noticed the proximity pattern, and you have noticed the attention quality, now the mirroring carries weight. One signal is an observation. 3 signals forming a pattern is a reading. The mistake most men make here is dismissing it as coincidence precisely because it happens so naturally, so undramatically. There is no moment. There is no signal fire. There is just the quiet, continuous synchronization of 2 people whose nervous systems are already responding to each other, and it looks like nothing until you know what it is. Mirroring happens below the level of conscious thought. But there's one signal that sits right at the edge of consciousness. She knows she's doing it, but she can't quite stop herself. She didn't have to tell you that. She chose to. And that choice was not random. Emotional self-disclosure, the act of sharing something personal, vulnerable, or unguarded, carries social risk. When a person reveals something real about themselves, they are opening a gap in the armor that most people keep in place in ordinary interaction. They are saying, I trust you enough to let you see something true. And that trust does not distribute equally. It goes where there is already an emotional draw. When a woman begins sharing things with you that she did not have to share, an opinion she normally softens for a crowd, a small fear she mentions almost quietly, a memory from her past that she brings in without obvious reason, she is not being careless. She is responding to something she feels. The disclosure is semi-conscious. She knows she is saying more than she usually would, but the draw toward you is stronger than the habit of restraint. What this looks like in a real conversation is subtle. She might tell you how she actually felt about something, rather than how she was supposed to feel. She might say she is nervous about something she would normally present with confidence. She might bring up a detail from her childhood or her past that did not fit naturally into the conversation, that arrived because you made her feel safe enough to say it out loud. Now, this is worth distinguishing carefully from performed vulnerability. which is a different behavior entirely. Some people use selective emotional disclosure as a form of social testing, offering something personal to see whether you respond with warmth, empathy, or dismissal. That kind of disclosure feels slightly too tidy, slightly too well constructed. The genuine kind often feels a little unguarded, like she surprised herself by saying it. Remember what I said at the very beginning, that there is a woman in your life right now showing you she wants you, and you are probably missing it. We are getting close to the signal most men not only miss, but actively misread as something else entirely. The mistake men make most often with emotional disclosure is treating it as ordinary conversation. She shared something personal, and he moved the conversation forward without registering what she had offered. Not because he did not care, but because he did not understand the weight of what had just happened. When a woman takes that risk with you, the correct response is not advice or redirection. It is simply being present with what she said. That moment of being received is what she was reaching for. Emotional disclosure is one of the clearest signals a woman can send, but it requires the right conditions to appear. The next signal requires nothing at all. It surfaces even when she's trying to stay composed. If she acts a little different around you, not cold, not warm, just different, that difference is worth paying attention to. Attraction creates a specific kind of internal pressure. It raises the stakes of ordinary interaction. When a woman is drawn to someone, even a routine conversation with that person carries more emotional weight than the same conversation would carry with anyone else. And that weight, that heightened investment, surfaces in her behavior in ways that look, to an untrained eye, like nothing more than a quirk or a mood. She might over-explain a joke she made, suddenly concerned that you misread it. She might become briefly quieter than usual when you speak in a group, not withdrawing from the conversation, but tracking it more carefully. She might check her appearance in a reflective surface as you approach, not dramatically, but in that small, almost unconscious way that people do when they suddenly remember how they look. She might choose her words with slightly more care than the conversation actually requires, then immediately say something unguarded that contradicts all that care. This is what psychologists call self-monitoring elevation, the state in which a person becomes more conscious of how they are presenting themselves because the audience suddenly matters more than usual. It is not anxiety in the clinical sense. It is simply that his presence has raised the internal stakes of the moment, and her behavior reflects that elevation. You might be thinking, couldn't this just mean she is uncomfortable around me? And yes, discomfort and attraction can produce some of the same surface behaviors. The distinction lies in the direction of her energy. Discomfort tends to reduce engagement over time. She gets quieter. She creates exits. She does not return to the conversation. What we are describing here is different. She is heightened, not withdrawn. Slightly more careful, but also slightly more open. The irregularity is not pulling her away from you. It is pulling her toward you in a way she has not quite found the smoothness for yet. The mistake most men make with this signal is interpreting the behavioral irregularity as a sign she is not interested. She seemed nervous. She stumbled over a sentence. She laughed at the wrong moment. And he concludes she is not comfortable with him, when the truth is closer to the opposite. Every signal so far has been something she does. The final one is something she creates. A pattern you probably noticed but never knew how to read. She came back. Maybe she texted about something small. Maybe she showed up in the same space again. She had a reason, but the reason wasn't the reason. This is the signal that sits most quietly in plain sight. It requires no dramatic moment. It produces no clear signal fire. It simply repeats, and most men who see it rationalize it as coincidence, friendliness, or boredom because they do not have the framework to recognize what returning actually means. When a woman is drawn to someone but has not yet found the opening to say so directly, whether because the timing is not right, because the social context makes directness complicated, or simply because she is waiting to understand more clearly what she feels, She does one consistent thing. She creates reasons to come back. The reasons themselves are almost never the real reason. She texts about something minor, a question she could have asked anyone, or did not strictly need an answer to. She shows up at an event or a place she knew you would be, mentioned so casually 2 weeks earlier that you barely registered it. She restarts a conversation that reached a natural ending point and had no obvious need to continue. She follows up on something you said days later in a context where most people would have let it pass. What she is doing is maintaining contact without having to name the contact. She is building a thread between you, thin, plausible, deniable, because she needs the connection to exist while she figures out whether it is safe to say so. This is not strategy in a calculated sense. It is the way attraction moves when directness feels too exposed. The returning is her saying something she has not yet said in words. Of course, context matters here more than anywhere else in this video. People reconnect for many reasons. Professional reasons, social reasons, logistical ones. A single return means nothing on its own. But when the returning is thin in its stated reason, warm in its emotional quality, and consistent across time, especially when it is happening alongside other signals we have covered today, what you are looking at is not coincidence. It is intent. The mistake most men make with this signal is the same mistake they make with all the others, only more so. They see the thin reason she gave for reaching out and they evaluate the text at face value. She asked about the restaurant recommendation. She needed to know what time something started. And so the conversation is about the restaurant, about the time, and the actual meaning of the reaching out passes completely unacknowledged. He answered the question. She came back. He answered that question too. And at some point, she stops returning because the thread she was building was never picked up from the other end. This is the signal most overlooked, not because it is invisible, but because it is too ordinary looking to trust. It does not announce itself. It arrives disguised as small, functional contact. And by the time most men recognize it, the window has already closed. What you now have is not a checklist. It is a framework, a way of seeing something that was always there, but that most men were never given the language to read. Think back over these 6 patterns as a single, unified picture. A woman who finds physical reasons to be near you, who listens to you with a quality of attention she does not give to everyone, whose body begins quietly synchronizing with yours in ways neither of you planned, who chooses, without fully knowing why, to let you see something true about her, who behaves with you in a way that is slightly, almost imperceptibly different from how she behaves with the rest of the world, and who keeps finding reasons to come back, even when the reason is paper thin. None of these signals alone is proof of anything, but when 2 or 3 of them appear together consistently across different moments and different days, what you are seeing is not ambiguity. What you are seeing is someone who has already made a decision about you that she has not yet said out loud. The deeper truth underneath all of this is simple. Attraction is not primarily expressed in dramatic gestures or direct declarations. It lives in the small, repeated, semi-conscious behaviors that a person cannot fully suppress when they feel something real. And once you know what those behaviors look like, you stop needing the declaration. You can see what is already there. You do not need to analyze every interaction from this point forward. That is not what this framework is for. It is not about turning every conversation into a test or reading into every moment. It is about having the quiet confidence that comes from knowing what you are actually looking at, so that when the pattern is there, you recognize it and you do not walk away from it without understanding what it was. Which of these 6 signals have you seen from someone recently, even one you almost dismissed as nothing? Leave it in the comments. I read everyone, and sometimes the details people share there are more revealing than they realize. If this kind of insight is useful to you, stay on this channel. What we do here is not surface-level advice. It is a deeper look at how human behavior actually works, explained clearly without noise. Next time, I want to talk about something that trips men up even after they've spotted the signals. Because there's a difference between a woman who is attracted to you and a woman who sees you as someone she actually wants to keep. And those two things don't always look the same.